주체 배고.
While the world focused on North Korea and its claim to have a thermonuclear weapon,
we have this madman over there who probably would use it.
They're radical, they're extreme, they're unpredictable.
This lunatic in North Korea has potentially tested a hydrogen bomb.
You may have missed another revelation in Syria.
Sky News has discovered a research and development wing more sophisticated than was ever imagined.
Journalists within our parent company discovered an ISIS research lab that appears to have access to heat-seeking warheads that can take out passenger jets.
It's very, very clever what they've done.
Former Deputy Defense Secretary Paul Wolfowitz will join us in studio with his insight on that and the breakdown in Iraq. And given his role in the invasion 13 years ago, we'll ask him why we were not greeted as liberators as he famously predicted.
We're dealing with a country that can really finance its own reconstruction and relatively soon.
Plus, we'll go through our poll numbers in the race to the White House, explain why Trump has a big lead in Florida, and work through the debate over new gun rules, what they mean, and where we go from here. This is Money, Power, and Politics. Hello, I'm Craig Patrick, and we have a lot of ground to cover. Former Deputy Secretary of Defense Paul Wolfowitz will join us here in studio in just a couple of minutes. He was a driving force in the U.S. invasion of Iraq, and I'll ask him what went wrong and what he would do differently. But we'll start with a closer look at the Trump phenomenon and our latest poll numbers right here in Florida, and one big thing that's working in Trump's favor that sets him apart from politicians of the past.
We're really puzzled.
Any of you know what this is?
We've spent weeks trying to figure out, what do you call this?
This is an Etch-a-Sketch.
Before the internet, for politicians, it was almost cool to be a stiff.
I've been watching you doing that Macarena on television.
But the age of social media changed everything.
All right, I'm on the way to a town hall. But first, let me take a selfie.
Now they'll do just about anything to try to look cool and go viral. And of course, many fail miserably.
Gangnam Style.
Sometimes they just make you cringe. And sometimes they strike viral gold. In President Obama's case, one of his fans did that for him. And then Obama Girl was followed up by Giuliani Girl, which didn't take off quite as much. But looking back, only Donald Trump knew what it took to make a Giuliani Girl go viral. Rudy Giuliani himself.
Oh, you dirty boy, you. Oh. Donald, I thought you were a gentleman.
And that's what gives Trump a striking advantage in this age of social media. He knows what works.
How great are they?
Which brings us to two of his biggest fans, Diamond and Silk.
They became an internet sensation.
They've done it in a way by channeling Donald Trump.
We as Americans want our jobs back here in our country where we can thrive again. We as Americans, baby.
They reinforce his message with a routine that may be getting more attention than all of his rivals' ads combined.
It doesn't mean for people to come over here in our country illegally and get free food, free housing, free education, free medical. It doesn't mean that. Don't mean illegal.
And if the candidates are afraid to attack Trump for fear that he'll unload on them,
Don't come for him unless he invites your ass, okay? That's all I got to say. And you can't.
Well, now they have to also worry about retaliation from Diamond and Silk.
Lindsey Graham, he had the nerves to call Donald Trump a jackass the other day.
And the other candidates who are gasping for air and hoping the race will shift to a serious discourse of issues must feel sick when they turn on TV.
Known on YouTube as a stump for Trump girls. How are you ladies doing tonight?
You guys are the best. I think I'm in love.
Can you tell me when you first knew that Donald Trump was your man?
No wonder Jeb Bush is tanked. This viral social media game is new to him. And with Trump, Jeb got played from the start.
You know what's happening to Jeb's crowd, as you know, right down the street? They're sleeping. They're sleeping now.
And now when Bush attacks Trump on issues, Trump has shown how he can deflect it simply by tweeting a picture of Jeb Bush picking his nose, which steers the debate to Jeb and whether he really stuck his finger up his nose. It was Photoshop, but that's not the point.
Just one other thing, I got to get this off my chest. Donald Trump is a jerk.
But by definition, jerks are naive and foolish. Trump is smart and crazy like a fox. And check out our latest Fox 13 poll showing Trump dominating the GOP race right here in Florida. Trump leads with 30%, followed by Ted Cruz at 20%, then Rubio and Jeb Bush down to 15% and 13% in their own home state.
That'll light up the Twitter.
Maybe there's a good justification for it. I can't think of one right offhand.
Donald Trump is a jerk.
Leave Donald Trump alone. Leave Donald Trump. Leave him alone. Period. Bye.
Okay, let's bring in our pollster, Matt Towery. Matt, you put these numbers together. Do they surprise you here in the state of Florida?
Well, a little bit. You know, Craig, we've seen in our last few polls that we've done for Fox 13, Donald Trump leading, and he continues to hold a rather substantial lead. But we now see Ted Cruz really consolidating a position, at least when you have all of the candidates listed. He has a pretty good position in second place. The interesting other part is that Marco Rubio, when you call this down to a second horse race, and that's primarily just the top tier candidates, Marco Rubio and Cruz are basically tied for second place, with Trump still pretty far ahead of them. So it's still Donald Trump's game right now in the state of Florida.
And when you ask likely Republican voters in the state of Florida to assess the last debate performance, they put not Rubio on top, they put Cruz and Trump on top. What do you make of that?
They do. It's interesting because, of course, as usual, we polled for some other Fox affiliates around the South. And in most of those other states, Donald Trump was the winner with no one being particularly close. In this instance, however, Cruz did extremely well in Florida. I mean, he's literally tied with Donald Trump, and Rubio's a little bit further back. I do think that we're seeing this pack begin to call out to about 3 or 4 candidates. And it looks like right now that we'd see Trump win Florida. And of course, Florida's a winner-take-all state, be the first one. But those 2 other candidates, Cruz and Rubio, appear to be the ones that are giving him the true run for the money in Florida right now.
When you look at what likely Republican voters in Florida say about Donald Trump's proposed Muslim ban, you have 73% agreeing with Trump on the Muslim ban in Florida, 23% disagreeing to some degree. How does that line up with what you're seeing in other states?
You know, it's the exact same percentage, give or take, you know, the margin of error in the other southern states. I was really surprised. I thought in Florida it might be a little lower. In fact, it was a little bit higher than, in fact, in Georgia by a point or so. And South Carolina, we haven't revealed yet. But in reality, we are looking right now at that move by Donald Trump, which many of the pundits thought was going to be another one of his big mistakes, as being something that's keeping him not only in the race, but as a substantial leader in the race.
Matt Towery, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Craig.
Coming up, you may not believe what journalists found in the war on ISIS. We'll take you through the weapons research lab for the terrorists, and we'll play Woulda, Coulda, Shoulda with Paul Wolfowitz, the man who helped plan the war in Iraq.
For the past 12 months, the world has known changes of almost biblical proportions. By the grace of God, America won the Cold War.
Well, after the Cold War, we got something called the Wolfowitz Doctrine. Paul Wolfowitz based it on the premise that we should preemptively strike threats to maintain our position as the lone superpower. 11 years later, Wolfowitz became the Deputy Secretary of Defense, where he helped develop the Bush Doctrine and the preemptive invasion of Iraq, which did not go as he had planned.
We found the weapons of mass destruction. We found biological laboratories.
Everybody knows that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction.
I have every reason to believe that the intelligence that we were operating off was correct.
No question we have said that Saddam Hussein possesses biological and chemical weapons.
We know where they are. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad and east, west, south, and north.
We won't be proven wrong.
I don't know anybody that I can think of who has contended that the Iraqis had nuclear weapons.
We believe he has, in fact, reconstituted nuclear weapons.
But on the specific issue of weapons of mass destruction, it's going to take time, and we're going to have to be patient.
Over time, the truth will come out.
Do we have any evidence yet of chemical or biological weapons on the ground?
These young men and women are in the middle of fighting a very difficult war. They have their hands full defeating the enemy. when that's done, we'll have time to look for those weapons of mass destruction. That's not our main focus right now.
And you have no doubt we'll find them in substantial numbers.
I've never seen the intelligence community as unified and confident in their basic judgment here.
Much has changed. Paul Wolfowitz is our special guest tonight, so we'll ask him to reflect on the war back then and here today. And today we'll start with the discovery of an ISIS weapons lab that's far more advanced than you may have thought. Here are some excerpts now from Stuart Ramsey in Sky News at Turkey's border with Syria.
It's in these streets that an IS member was captured. With him, a hard drive containing hours of training videos. It was passed to Sky News. It illustrates some of their plans and unveils their technical abilities. The research teams may be well qualified, but they pay scant regard to their own safety. The work, though, in this room reveals one of the most shocking developments ever known about Islamic State. They're converting a missile from a jet fighter and making it into a surface-to-air missile. There's a heat-seeking warhead. It can take out a passenger jet, and 99% of the time these missiles hit their targets. This is altogether more serious than anything we've seen from Islamic State so far. A jihadi college training foreign fighters to fight in other countries, while also developing missiles for the war in Iraq and Syria and elsewhere. It was suspected, but never seen. Although this film and its hoard of intelligence has been intercepted, it is just one. There will be copies, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of jihadists eager to learn.
Please welcome Paul Wolfowitz. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Let's start with this evidence that ISIS now has access to heat-seeking warheads. What are the implications of this, not just for our military, but for passenger jets all across Europe?
It's very serious. I mean, if in fact they have the ability to activate these old missiles where the batteries have gone dead, then in fact poses, I think, a very serious threat to civil aviation all around the world.
You're advising Jeb Bush. Explain to us to what extent you're advising him. How often have you met? What have you talked about?
Look, he's pretty busy on the campaign trail. He's a very active emailer, so most of the communications take place by email and with his very good staff down in Miami.
Let's go back to the question that Megyn Kelly asked Jeb Bush.
Knowing what we know now, would you have authorized the invasion?
I would have.
Knowing what we now know, would you have authorized the invasion?
Look, some people take that as meaning if we knew there were so-called no weapons of mass destruction, although in fact there were programs that he was getting ready to reactivate. We don't know what the world would be like today if Saddam were still in power. I think all the evidence suggests that he would be very actively promoting the kind of terrorism that we're dealing with, that he would be exploiting the situation in Syria. He was a very dangerous man. And one of the things that we're seeing is that in many ways ISIS had its roots in the Saddam Hussein era, when he started turning to Islam as a weapon against Iran during the Iran-Iraq War, and then even more as a weapon against the Shia after the uprisings in 1991. Well, so I think he was dangerous and would have become more dangerous with time.
Woulda, coulda, shoulda. There clearly was a breakdown in the extended reconstruction. We were not greeted as liberators. What was the problem? What would we learn? What should we have done?
By the way, that's not actually true. There are many, many places where we were greeted as liberators, and a lot of people that were very excited about being rid of his very tyrannical rule. I think the heart of the problem in many ways was that we were not prepared for the kind of active insurgency that we encountered. We had forgotten the lessons that we learned very painfully after many years in Vietnam about how to fight a counterinsurgency. It wasn't until General Petraeus came in and changed the strategy with the very strong support of President Bush that we began to make the inroads against it that we should have been able to do right from the start. I think it was the security situation that was the biggest problem.
And the current administration certainly appears to have underestimated the threat of ISIS. What do you make of these complaints coming out of CENTCOM that intelligence was whitewashed and doctored?
There's an investigation going on. I really don't know about that. But what does disturb me that I do know about is there were apparently, I've heard numbers as high as 150,000 pages of documents that were seized in the Abbottabad raid from bin Laden. And for whatever reason, they aren't even widely available within the intelligence community, much less to the general public. There's something wrong. I think there's a desire, and there was a desire back in 2012, if you remember the rhetoric, bin Laden is dead and Al-Qaeda is on the road to defeat. And then suddenly it turns out, well, something worse than Al-Qaeda has sprouted up, and the tide of war is not receding. And I think there's a certain amount of pressure to have a narrative that supports that, and that's not healthy.
What specifically do we do today? How do we win over Sunnis today? Remember that ISIS swept into Iraq in pickup trucks because they were unchallenged, because many considered ISIS a desirable alternative to the Shia-led persecution they faced.
At least the lesser evil, and I think that's the problem that we're dealing with in this whole problem. I think there are certainly many, many people under ISIS rule in both Syria and Iraq who hate the people that are ruling them, would like to be living in a different way. But if the alternative is to be living under Bashar Assad in Syria or living under a Shia tyranny in Iraq, then unfortunately they will choose ISIS, I'm afraid. It's going to take a huge effort and a lot of convincing of people that we're not going to walk away from them this time the way we did 6 years ago.
Mr. Wolfowitz, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Coming up, we'll put the power struggle over gun rules in context, and we'll show you how it could play out. Well, former President Bill Clinton signed a ban on assault weapons back in the 1990s, and Congress let it expire in 2004. After a series of mass shootings, President Obama tried to renew it and failed. He tried to get Congress to expand background checks and failed. So now he's taking executive action to expand background checks, and his Republican critics say that he's infringing on the Second Amendment or overstepping his authority.
Now, since the president has lost all of that, he now has decided he's just going to write laws on his own. He's going to give us edicts as if he's a king, and that is a petulant child.
All of us need to demand a Congress brave enough to stand up to the gun lobby's lies. The gun lobby may be holding Congress hostage right now, but they cannot hold America hostage.
This goes back to an age-old debate. Our founding fathers rebelled from an oppressive empire and did not want our new government to become oppressive in the future. So they gave us the right to carry weapons to fend off tyranny. And the Supreme Court later confirmed that right extends to individuals.
15 KT at only 500 feet.
But there is a limit to the kinds of weapons we can own. Of course, we can't have our own nuclear bombs. On the other hand, the Supreme Court ruled handguns cannot be banned. In general, we have a right to weapons that are not specifically designed for the military. So President Obama is tightening gun rules through executive actions, and Republicans claim he's abusing his power. But remember, we've been through this back and forth many times before, and it cuts both ways.
Whenever I can act on my own, I'm going to do that.
Republicans say he's overreaching, but they were okay with executive orders when they ran the White House.
I'm going to sign an executive order today.
Remember back then, the Democrats cried abuse of power, and one particular rose to power by challenging the president's power.
The biggest problems that we're facing right now have to do with George Bush trying to bring more and more power into the executive branch and not go through Congress at all.
But when he became president, the tables turned.
Wherever and whenever I can take steps without legislation, that's what I'm going to do.
President Obama once attacked Bush for keeping secrets.
There's been a tendency on the part of this administration to try to hide behind executive privilege every time there's something a little shaky that's taking place.
Then he used executive power to keep more secrets.
No more secrecy. That's a commitment I make to you as president.
He also ran on reeling in government surveillance, then extended the Patriot Act and ramped it up before the latest reforms.
No more illegal wiretapping of American citizens.
So with this gun debate and much more before that, we're sort of reliving the past decade in reverse.
Isn't that remarkable?
We're not going to use signing statements as a way of doing an end run around Congress. Whenever I can act on my own, I'm going to do that.
This debate over the president's power is nothing new. Our forefathers created a divided government to keep that debate going and keep executive power in check. And as for the contradictions and flip-flops we've shown you, well, that's also nothing new. That's just part of politics on both sides on all levels of government.
A senator made a proposal, and when given an opportunity for a vote on that proposal, filibustered his own proposal.
Oh, I didn't change my mind at all.
We'll be looking at that over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I don't remember saying a few weeks. I don't think that's what I said.
That's a red line for us. A red line for us. I didn't set a red line.
Whiplash.
Coming up, with the Florida legislature heading back to work, we'll roll out a brand new segment we'll call 60 Days of Stupid. State lawmakers admit that they failed last year and deserve to be mocked. So as we head back to work and they head back to work, we have a brief recap of their last regular session in a new segment called 60 Days of Stupid.
Nobody does it better.
You have my commitment.
But we have done all that we can do for this session.
I believe in my heart.
A pension crisis does exist.
We will start the discussion about Medicaid expansion.
We don't have any legislation in the House with regard to Medicaid expansion.
We're here for, 59 days to get it right.
And so having accomplished all that we can do, it's time for us to go home.
All right, that's our show. We'll see you every Sunday night at 11:30. Also, check us out on Facebook. That's Fox 13's Craig Patrick on Facebook. Once again, we will see you next week. Take care.